Welcome back to part 2 of this contemplation with Scorpion. Scorpion is guiding me in this back into my body. That's what's happening. I am asking to heal the deep need for other people to approve of and accept me. Truly, I cannot jump through enough hoops to please everyone, and so I ask for help in giving myself the esteem I desire, to believe in myself enough to eradicate the shadow need for other people's approval. Whoa, Scorpion went in a totally different direction than I thought. When I thought I was using that toxin to change my life, I was just falling into society's idea of what I'm supposed to look like. So I'm squishy. Who said squishy was bad? See, right now in my body I'm going, but squishy is bad. It's bad. You know, I've had 67 years of that voice in my head. I have just learned in the last few years that my mom had she didn't have disordered eating, but she definitely had body issues, and including dieting while I was in the womb. That's what's wanting to be healed. What's really wanting to be healed actually does go into the self-esteem bucket. But a self-esteem around my body, at least that's the entry point. And so it's healing this massive false programming. And this reminds me of my IQ and the shadow of corruption, which is absolute false programming. Fat phobia is prevalent through a whole culture and has been since I've been alive. You know, the role model that I had in my preteen years was Twiggy. And Twig, she's a twig. Am I a twig? Far from it, you know. So no wonder I think that, I'm a little squishy. Yeah, I had 2 babies. Yeah, I'm got a little squishy right there. Yeah, I have thunder thighs. I'm not hating them as much as I used to, as I'm patting them down. And I think that may be what I'm going to need to do partially is to consciously reprogram that stuff. I think knowing that it's false programming is part of the answer. But another part of me just comes, just almost slingshots back and says, but fat is ugly. Fat is ugly. Nobody's going to love you. Fat is ugly. I'm reminded of my son who had a very big teacher in kindergarten. And at that time, of course, I'm fat phobic myself. And I make some kind of comment about, Mrs. She's kind of big. Wanting him, of course, to come back and say, yeah, she is. She's so fat. You know what he came back and said? She's as big as God. With this just open-hearted, loving, innocent, non-programmed mind. She's as big as God. And I just imagined her enveloping him in this loving embrace, So, what was I like when I was his age? What was I like in kindergarten? Oh, now this is an interesting thing. When I was at that age, 1st and 2nd grade, though, I had a teacher who was also not as big as his teacher, nor was she as beautiful. His teacher just glowed. His teacher glowed. My teacher was evil. She was squishy and fat and smelled and she was very harsh. We had a special needs child, which would be called special needs now. He was back then called retarded. And when he didn't get something, she'd stand him in the wastebasket and rap his knuckles, you know. And even I knew at that time that was wrong. So I don't need to continue that story. I had that teacher for 2 years, and I was wrecked during those 2 years. You know, I think of my mother's voice in my head being critical. This woman's voice, Mrs. Levitt. You know, there's been a lot of inner work done on Mrs. Levitt, but I have only looked at the body part of it once, I think, in my journeys. But now I'm thinking about it again. Did I get my own reinforcement for fat is bad from Mrs. Levitt? Because I already had that, because my mother had that. Okay, I'm not giving my mother a pass on this, but I'm also not going to blame her, because she was a product of her upbringing, and she was a product of her generation. And, you know, I'm an adult, and I need to take responsibility for my responses to these people. So, how now do I take my knowledge of this corrupted programming and turn it into the tiny bits of venom that I need for wellness in this area? How do I do that? And I don't know exactly. As I'm talking to you right now, I'm thinking that reprogramming the corrupted programming that I got when I was younger is a possibility. Prayers, definitely. I do well with prayers. It's as if I'm setting an intention, you know, to let go of something. But I think another thing that is very important came up later. I was walking in the woods before these last few rainy days, and there were dragonflies everywhere. They had to have just come up their stalks to become dragonflies, because they were flitting in this little area, you know, on our ranch over in the west is where I first noticed them. And I had, you know, God, there were 15, 20, 25 of them in this little glen area. Then I moved a little farther on, and in another sunlit area there were more, and then closer to the house there were more, and then I even noticed some in my yard, and some were really small, others were a little larger. It was like magic. And I thought, you know, I let that happen a couple of days, and then I realized, wait a minute, that's a lot of dragonflies, and I haven't noticed dragonflies all summer. I think I need to look this up. So I looked the dragonfly up, and the dragonfly is gene key 55. So I've added this message from the dragonfly to my contemplation with Scorpion. Now, the dragonfly is talking about the past. Okay, here. For spiritual awareness to attain its zenith, it cannot discard, but it must integrate. Now, we're talking about the past. So you don't discard the past, integrate the past. I did a whole art journal page. Oh, did you catch the middle? I've been listening to Richard a lot. And Richard talks about the discipline of softness. What a beautiful paradox. So here I have this past, this mother who, even to her dying day, was talking about her weight. And then I have this teacher. All these things are in the past. They're all in my memory. Part of me wanted to eradicate all of these messages, including the cultural messages, about fat phobia and people being fat are lazy and they're good for nothing and blah, blah, blah. And so first I wanted to eradicate them, just fucking eradicate them. Know about them, but right now I'm going to rip the programming out, just let them go, until Dragonfly came along. So, how do you, what was the word he used? Integrate that message. How do you integrate those messages you got, yet let go of the power of those messages on you? I think that's what I really am working on. How do you integrate that? I think that is a great place to stop now. Lots of stuff to consider, right? And tomorrow I will continue, and I will see you then.